Okay, I think it should be good to go. Oh, I admit her. Okay. It is very loud, guys. So we do have to.
Yeah.
I can hear and see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So we're going to start with, we're going to pick up on slide 3, which is where I believe I left off. Funding must be spent only within the following initiatives. For illustration, examples of programs by initiatives subject to SED approval are included here. Additional instructional time, time on task, example, is extended school day or year initiatives. Model programs for multilingual learners. Example of that is expansion of bilingual resource materials in libraries. Full day pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. An example of that is adding classes or additional staff and or costs related to implementing full day pre-kindergarten 4K. Class size reduction. The example is hiring and placing additional teachers in a classroom to reduce the student-teacher ratio. Teacher and principal quality initiatives. The example is the creation of a non-cash incentive program to encourage high-quality teachers to teach in high-needs areas. Middle high school restructuring. The example is expanding participation in advanced placement programs. Additionally, the SED Commissioner may authorize districts to implement experimental programs such authorization must be granted in advance of implementation. More information about eligible uses and requirements may be found at NYCED's website at https://www.p12.nicet.gov/MGTSERV/htm. Each year, New York State Education Department sets NYCPS's C4E amount based on the annual increase in foundational aid in excess of 3%. In fiscal year 27, the amount of funding we must designate towards C4E is increasing by $269 million, bringing the total to $1.358 billion. It is important to note that $45 million of the $269 million increase is not new funding. It's already allocated to schools as foundation aid for class size reduction. It will be phased in as C4E in fiscal year 2027 and will continue to be used toward class size reduction. The new C4E funding, $224 million, will be used to support schools that require additional resources to meet the state's class size reduction mandate. There's also additional tax levy funding being allocated for this purpose. Now for the breakdown of the C4E funding. We categorize C4E allocations as discretionary and targeted. Discretionary means that schools may use C4E funding in any eligible way that best meets the needs of their students. Targeted means that C4E is being used to support a specific program, and schools must use C4E funding in support of that program. Of the $1.358 billion, $487 million of it will be allocated as discretionary, C4E, and $871 million will be allocated as targeted. The $871 million of targeted programs now include $464 million toward the state's class size reduction mandate, $183 million of fair student funding to be used toward teacher salaries, $91 million restricted to teacher salaries, $87 million for integrated co-teaching classrooms, $30 million for academic summer programming, $9 million for full day pre-K, and $7 million for autism spectrum disorder classrooms. Now for our proposed district's allocations. Yelena, there are no TPs for this slide in particular. Am I just reading through?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There's no talking points for this slide.
No, you just read the numbers. Because
Yeah.
the numbers, what they are, what they
Okay.
are.
So discretionary funding, schools decide on the use within allowable programs. And that's 40,260,803, which constitutes 40.22%.
I have a question.
Sure.
Wait, let's finish the discussion and then ask them.
C4E for class size reduction mandate targeted, so schools must spend that for this purpose. And that's $31,128,221, which constitutes 31%. Fair student funding is targeted. Schools must spend this for this purpose, and that's $16,875,091. Phase-in for class size, which is targeted. Schools must spend it for this purpose, $6,666,535, which is 6.66%. Integrated co-teaching classrooms, which is targeted. Again, schools must spend for that purpose, $3,462,556, which is 3.46%. Summer programming, which is maintenance of effort, $1,708,803, which constitutes 1.71%. And then full day pre-kindergarten, which is targeted. Schools must spend for that purpose at $5,531, which is 0.01%, totaling $100,107,550.
Can I ask a follow-up on those numbers?
Sure.
I have it, because that's got them. I have the numbers. I just don't know what to do.
So we will take public comment into account in the coming weeks as we continue to work toward complying with this mandate. The deadline for submitting public comment will be July 29th, 2026. Please share your comments and feedback by using the C4E email address you see on the screen. Now we're moving into the second major topic. We've already discussed the C4E funding stream. Now we will wrap up by discussing the fiscal year 27 class size reduction plan. At this point, we don't need to report, correct?
We have to report the whole.
The whole thing? In September 2022, Governor Hochul enacted Chapter 556 of the Laws of 2022, which requires the New York City school districts to create a class size reduction plan for all New York City K-12 community districts and high schools. Chapter 556 sets forth requirements that apply only to the New York City school district, including new class size caps for all district K-12 schools, a class size reduction plan, which must be approved by the United Federation of Teachers, the UFT, and the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, the CSA, which are the unions representing New York City school district teachers, principals respectively, and submitted as part of the contract for excellence. A prescribed timeline for public process for the development, posting, and submission of the contract for excellence. Annual implementation reports submitted to NYSED on the status of the class size reduction plan. Penalties in the form of withheld or reduced state funding if adequate progress to reduce class sizes is not made. The law imposes specific class size caps within the New York City school district for the first time. Prior legislation required a plan to reduce average class sizes and did not set forth specific average class size caps. Class size caps had previously been set subject to collective bargaining agreements between New York City Public Schools and the UFT and could be exceeded in certain circumstances. As a reminder, the law prescribes specific class size caps of 20 students in K-3, 23 students in 4 to 8, in grades 4 to 8, and 25 students in grades 9 to 12, 40 students in PE and performing arts groups, in all grades. On June 4, 2026, both houses of the New York State Legislature passed amendments to the class size law that changed the annual citywide compliance targets for NYCPS to 70% in school year 26-27, 80% in school year 27-28, 90% in school year 28-29, and 100% in school year 29-30. NYCPS is fully in support of this change in timeline to ensure that our intensive focus on capital strategies for class size reduction can take root and be implemented with fidelity. On June 10th, NYCPS released a draft version of the class size reduction plan for the 26-27 school year. As a reminder, this plan must be signed off on by the United Federation of Teachers, the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, CSA, in addition to the New York City Public Schools. This draft plan has not been signed off on by the Chancellor and the respective labor partners' presidents and may be revised based on feedback obtained during the public comment process. The draft plan includes specific actions for schools along with the detailed plan of implementation that is being undertaken across the NYCPS central offices, alongside the School Construction Authority, which I will discuss in more detail on the next slide. The public is able to provide feedback on the draft plan via this process. The email to share feedback is in the final slide of this section. In the draft plan, we highlight critical data points regarding current compliance across the city, which are also outlined on the slide and show compliance rates across the city for school year 25-26. Our compliance rate for school year 25-26 is 64%, including exemptions. Without exemptions, the compliance rate was 59.5%. The required benchmark for this school year is 60%. The changes proposed in the plan will support us in making progress to meet the benchmark for school year 26-27 of 70%. Data show that the districts with the greatest percentage of classes at or below the class size caps are in districts 32, Bushwick, which has reached 81% compliance, 23, Ocean Hill and Brownsville, and 16, Stuyvesant Heights, Crown Heights. District 26, Bayside, Glen Oaks, 31, Staten Island, and 20, Bay Ridge, Fort Hamilton, have the lowest percentage of classes at or below the class size caps. While this data demonstrates district level averages, there are schools within the comparatively higher compliance districts that do have classes that exceed the new class size caps. Class size compliance varies across grade bands, with the highest compliance rates in elementary schools. The Bronx has the highest share of classes in compliance with the class size caps at 71%, followed by Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island in that order. This slide demonstrates the growth in compliance from school year 24-25 to school year 25-26. Progress that is also outlined within the fiscal year 27 class size reduction plan. This is the result of funding allocated for teachers to schools through the school-driven process in last year's plan. Through these efforts, the impact on compliance across the city was as follows. Elementary grades made the most significant progress. Grades K to 3 saw a 28.7% increase in compliance, while grades 4 to 5 increased compliance by 23.1%. Middle and high schools made meaningful progress. Middle schools grew 20.4 points. Middle school grew 20.4 points more compliant, while high schools grew 16 points more compliant. Schools that were awarded additional teaching positions increased compliance by 27 points, as contrasted with 7 points for schools that were not awarded additional teaching positions through the fiscal year 26 funding process. Next, I will provide an overview of key components of the draft plan. In addition to the summary of impact outlined on the previous slides, the draft plan covers the following major components of the approach to class size implementation and more, including the fiscal year 27 class size planning and funding survey, which served as a critical data collection point to support planning for fiscal year 27 and the out years of implementation. Details on the more intensive approach to capital planning, utilizing survey results and other data, including an increase in $1.5 billion in the current capital plan to align with this approach. The approach to teacher recruitment to support teacher hiring for class size, and the allocation of $244 million to support teacher hiring for class size reduction. This plan is accessible at the following link, that I'm not going to read. Again, this is a draft version that has not yet been signed off on by the UFT or the CSA, who are required to sign off on the final plan. Class size reduction is a complex process that requires increased investments in not only teachers, but also in classroom space. Under Chancellor Samuels and Mayor Mamdani, NYCPS has made a shift in the approach to planning and considering space in relation to class size reduction efforts, marking a substantial commitment to implementation. To that end, in March 2026, NYCPS and the School Construction Authority engaged in a new collaborative approach to evaluating and planning for space needs to support class size reduction. Through this joint effort, teams from both agencies reviewed over 600 schools that they had centrally identified space deficits and developed a comprehensive plan to identify pathways to provide each school with the necessary space to comply with the law. For the first time, the plan includes a strategic blend of capital as well as non-capital strategies that aim to more efficiently utilize existing space to support compliance, and is described in greater detail in section 4.3.1 of the draft plan. The City of New York, under Mayor Mamdani's leadership, also added an additional $1.5 billion into the capital plan to support the construction of new seats, in alignment with this new approach. Broadly, the following categories represent the range of approaches we will take to support each school with space needs. Non-capital, high school policy and programming. For many of our high schools, space needs can be addressed through efficient programming and policy adjustments rather than changes to physical space. These schools will receive centralized support to explore such opportunities and may inform system-level policy proposals. Non-capital, Tier 1 enrollment and/or space in building. These are schools where minor adjustments to incoming enrollment or reallocations of space within co-located campuses may resolve space needs. Non-capital, Tier 2. These schools are in districts or areas where there are existing nearby buildings that may have excess capacity that can be utilized to support compliance. These will be explored for comprehensive solutions within the context of district-wide needs and through community engagement. Could lead to residings, mergers, or other changes in school utilization subject to public review and PEP approval, or rezonings subject to CEC approval. And finally, capital. These are schools where some level of capital investment may be needed, ranging from smaller capital task force CTF projects to increase capacity within schools with smaller space needs, to the construction of new school buildings or additions to address larger needs. In the next phase of this work, superintendents are working with the Office of District Planning and other central teams to consider the preliminary pathways identified for schools and work with communities through the planning process, as well as in partnership with SCA and the next steps for each identified school. We will consider all feedback received on our proposed plan during the public process. The deadline for submitting public comment will be July 29, 2026. Those who wish to provide feedback may submit their comments by email to classsize@schools.nyc.gov. This concludes the presentation. Please be mindful of all the email addresses provided for public comment for each section.
Can we go back to slide 5?
Sure. 5?
Yeah, I'm not this one. So, contract for excellence is only a fraction of other funding sources. So this is purely contract for excellence money for District 24. So District 24 received $100 million, a little over $100 million. $40,260,803. Can you go back to slide all those things, like after school programs, additional teachers for pushing people out, for Saturday families, like maybe educational software, professional development for teachers. So those are special programs. Can we go back to the slide? Then $31 million, 128,000, is going to for class size reduction mandate. So last year and this year, schools received additional funding for newly opened classes on particular grades due to the class size between the state law. So far, so good?
Sorry, so discretionary is separate from the discretionary funds that each principal has.
So principal gets all kinds of funds.
Right.
The discretionary we're talking about is only contract for excellence discretionary. And that could be spent in 6 areas. Let's go back to slide 10. For this area, in this area. Now, they have school receive other funds. Title I, person funding, they can spend us, whatever they want. We're talking about discretionary within the 6 schools.
Right.
Right there. So that's what
The class size reduction is on this list and also here. So,
correct.
okay,
Correct.
that's just a buck, like a buck.
So within this discretionary, they can also use the funding to use process. Okay. So this one, the $31 million, can only be done. Okay, so within this discretion, they can use it for the use class size or for other programs. For L, for the class size, for school programs, for professional development. Yeah. Now, they also embedded the fifth year student funding is $60 million. And some of that money is targeted. So some of that money will say CL, which means let's say the C4E ICT, which means they have to spend it for the ICT class. The three class. The third one, $16 million. Fair student funding. So even though it's contract for excellence, they embed it into the fair student funding, which is easier to schedule. What is fair student funding? Fair student funding is the most flexible funding that schools receive on per capita basis. They receive, like in elementary school, $4,100 per child. Okay. So they also embedded that into fair student funding contract for excellence. Now, the phase-in for class size. So the phase-in, it's the money that they received last year, and they're receiving it again. Integrated quotation class. So this is for ICT classes, the classes for special education where they have to do. Summer programming maintenance of effort. So as you know, in the past few years after COVID, we expanded summer school and we call it summer rising. And now we're maintaining that from year to year, and it is 24 on the portion or from the contract question, which is $1.7 million for summer school.
And that's just a portion of the cost of summer rising, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
This is not full cost. We have other, this is just what comes from the contract for yes. And then for the pre-K, again, $5 million, which is, beautiful, they're wonderful. But we also receive other pre-K money from the state and the city. This is just a tiny, maybe, couple of schools with their allocation, but all other schools receive other pre-K money. So altogether, just for contract for excellence, District 24 received $102 million, 107,550.
So how much would that break down per school?
No, it's not for school.
That's not for school.
No, this is
The
the whole
district as a
district.
whole.
It's like wherever it's needed.
Like for school.
Yeah.
Within our
You can
Do
see
you decide this?
in a
Yes,
stand.
city.
You decide how to.
No.
School decide.
So like,
Schools with the SOT decide how to spend the money.
So how is actually, oh wait, but that's it. I had a question for you about that, about something.
Okay. So you can see how much each school receives. We have access to school allocation memorandum. Go to Google and Google school allocation memorandum.
whoa.
It will tell you each particular school, how much they receive for class size, how much they receive discretionary. There are spreadsheets. So I'll tell you which stands you should go, and then there's 2 stands. Stand 5, I believe. Yes. Yeah. Click on that one. Okay. Click on that. Okay. Click by numbers, 2027. I scroll down all the way to the bottom. Okay, you see contract grant allocation summary? Can we click on that? No,
Like the table
right
one?
there. It's gonna have Excel table, which is, you can filter it and it has full city, but you can filter it by district. And then there's another standard, we extend 23, that will have, this class size contract. So if you scroll down to district 24, I mean, yeah, it includes the whole city, so it's up to all. Yeah, so it tells you, which is 2024, year, and 2020, they probably come on a little bit longer stamp, and then you can see total allocation for each school. You don't have to take a picture, go online, it's not restricted.
Yeah, I'm
Everyone
going
has
to.
access to that information. Okay? And then if you can go back to, the, full allocation memorandum page, go back to standby numbers. So within the schools, like we saw, there was a total allocation and the schools decide how to schedule, it's been a parameters, it's been rules that they were just,
Kicked off.
and I believe it's 1023, or they all sent, for contract. Okay, I believe it's 23, hold on. 23.
Which one? Which
No,
one?
not, no. Let's go to Sam 5, and we'll tell you which other contract workforce what we need. Hold on. Wait. Right there. Sam 43.
Which?
43. Yep. And, it will also have a Excel spreadsheet, you can scroll down there to the bottom, right there. Table 1. And it will tell you, which school the district funds in last year, in 2026, and additional funds in 2027.
So like the portion of C4E specific to class size wouldn't go to schools that didn't receive funding this year.
So like we would have gotten 0 for class size.
Are you interested in what in the school?
If we're here, yeah, oh, so we're not on the list because we didn't receive it, right?
Not for this.
Well, what school?
49.
49, the school has to apply.
Oh, we didn't know, that's why,
The
yeah.
school has to apply every winter, they submit the paperwork to the superintendent. Right, and what other questions do you have?
Yeah, I guess, I don't even know if this is an appropriate question for here, but I was just trying to better understand. So this discretionary $487 million
Are
that
you
says,
talking about the CUI?
yeah, so it's, I've been waiting, if we want to stay on this, I'm sorry, I'm jumping
No,
in.
that's it, that's for your information, if you wanna see what the school sees, then, I'll give it to you, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have it, that's yes.
So what were your questions?
My question was just, I guess when it says, when you read that, it says SLTs will work, this is term. How is that supposed to work in a school? Like the principal comes to the SLT and then they, you know what I'm asking? Like in a perfect world, how is it supposed to work with the SLT in
So
regards
if
to
you have
determination?
questions in terms of the SOT work and how it's supposed to be working within the school, you can always go to space. They have rules of what SOT,
But
does.
they are supposed to help with,
So there's certain things that SOT has no say, because the funds are given to class
then
reduction.
it has to
It
go.
is a whole class reduction. If the funds are dispersed, discretionary, then the principal and the SOC come to agreement how to spend the discretionary fund. So the principal can say, based on the data that we have, we need more emphasis on the math instruction because, the data from the last census saying this is the weak area for the students. And so I propose the math after school. And then SOT would agree or disagree, I don't know, I'm not participating.
Right, no, no, that makes sense.
But it has to be a collaborative process between the SOT and the principal.
Okay.
But the principal is in charge of the school budget.
That's the different one. Okay. That's awesome.
It's a collaborative process.
That's awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have some questions about the small class size, but is that a,
People will ask, and if we can't answer, there is a public process where you can submit all of the questions.
Sure.
Or comments, it doesn't have to be a question, if you want to comment on something, something you want to see in the future, or something you want to propose, you could also submit it.
okay. My question is what changed in 2025, 2026 to, result in the change that you showed, the maps? Yeah, like what was it that caused this change in compliance?
So, are you speaking of like, so when, at the point where we discussed, like some of the boroughs or some of the schools, or grade bands that were more compliant?
Yeah, like, I mean, should I assume that
We improved compliance because a lot of schools, especially in District 24, last year received additional funds to reduce class size. So we have now a lot of classes at the new state level law. Not every class, but a lot. For District 24, it's 63%.
right? And so the change from the previous year was due to additional funding
Correct.
and additional,
Additional
Was there-
classes open.
was there also more like attention paid, like? from-
That's attention based. When you give schools the money, they hire more teachers and open additional classes because of the new law.
But there was also like different opportunities in different districts, right? So like some of the districts that you heard about, so there's a, I won't say specifically what district, but there's a district that has, people count just shy of 5,000. And so you have many schools, a lot of space, not a lot of kids.
Right, clearly there's differences,
Yeah,
yes.
so the Bronx is another area where student enrollment has dipped quite
Yeah.
a bit. Because while student enrollment has dropped in Queens, we still have 40 units, right? We still have overcrowded schools. And the schools that are not like fully overcrowded, they're still at like 70, 80, 90% utilization, which makes it difficult for a larger school to comply fully. So there are schools like 61, like 49, like 128, 87, 19, like 113, right? Almost a third of our schools right there find it extremely difficult to even like to get it done. So the slide that talks about the pathways. So we've already begun this process. We've already had 3 pretty substantive conversations looking at utilization in our schools and targeting those schools at the highest utilization and go after it, right? Like this, you can't do anything but build
Right.
for these schools. And the CDC has been a part of that conversation with 119 in particular because they're a school that has potentially some opportunity in terms of space. So there's duly operated space between parks in the city that borders the school that potentially could be utilized to construct, and they are the one school in our district that is their highest utilization of 134%. And the need and the demand it seems at that school just like through the roof.
119.
119 together. But then we have like 113. The 13 is very similar. 113 doesn't have they don't have the local potential in terms of space that 118 does. But for each of those schools, like we went through, except for that first one, the high school policy and program, we actually went through this process for each of our schools to to consider like what is a potential pathway forward, and they asked us and they charged us with being as creative as possible, and we were really creative. Like, and said, you know what? Like, just think outside the box, and what is a way to get the school into compliance? And some of them were even like, all right, so maybe we take a school and we take the lower grades and we house them in a location that is already existing, that's not utilized, and we convert it into schools. So SEA is already in the
That's
process.
where like Catholic church, like
Exactly.
Catholic schools come into
Exactly.
play.
Exactly. We also have some pre-K spaces and early childhood spaces.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
they
our
realize,
schools
yeah,
are all over
wild.
the place
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not being used. So we've been looking at each one of those towards viability. And so when we do that, we're looking at distance, we're looking at the makeup of the neighborhood, we're looking at how different the new location is from the home location. We're thinking about what the capacity in those spaces.
Is zoning ever an,
It
like
can
if you look at our 49 to 128,
yeah,
nobody would like that answer, but if they simply would, whoop,
yeah.
put, no one would like that answer. They would burn your house.
They-
But they would burn both schools down. But I'm just saying, like, to have a school at almost 13 and a school at just over 7, I think, that book in the park is absolutely insane. And we can't go like 49, so I just,
Zoning is an option, it's an alternative.
I mean, obviously, it's like,
It's
I just
the
wonder
most challenging,
Yeah.
it's one of the most challenging,
Yeah.
and the capital improvement zone is
to
challenging.
build where you can't go.
Yeah.
So
And
is-
securing the funding, and thinking about when, like, any of these
Yeah.
things can actually happen.
Of course.
So is the blocker right now teachers and funding or physical classrooms?
So you think is it what?
Is the blocker like hiring enough teachers, finding enough teachers, paying enough teachers, or is it finding enough classrooms, physical space?
It's depending on the district. For us, it's space. In the Bronx, like 26% special ed vacancies. So special ed teachers in the Bronx are 26% vacancies, but they can't get them. Here we don't have that issue. Here our issue is more so like space.
And then my other question was inside of the non-capital solutions, is part of this conversation like hiring more teachers, like a co-teaching situation where like 2 teachers in one room would then increase the allowable number of students because it reduces the student to teacher ratio. Like, is that part of this, or is it all just one teacher, one classroom, more classrooms, more teachers?
Yeah,
Like,
so earlier in the presentation, you heard them refer to, in the past, there was an agreement between the city and the unions to reduce class size, but there was no limit ever established. And part of that was this annual like resetting of what the bar is. So like how many is too many, and in that process, that was what you suggested, adding another person to the room was a way to reduce class size overall.
I never even thought about
I
it.
think, what was that?
I just never, so she said that, I just
Yeah.
didn't even think that would be a.
Yeah, so that's, as a principal, like, that's how they force me into compliance, right? So like, well, we have to reduce, we gotta add another body in there. And so we would have to hire another teacher. But then, like, the specifics around that shifted from year to year. So like the interpretation of what that was.
And salary wise, that's hard too, right? Because you're not increasing, you're almost decreasing your number of kids, which is what you get paid
Right.
for, but yet your salary's going up, but
Exactly.
your income, is not, right?
so that's not really a consideration.
I think everything is a consideration right now. Right now, that in its draft form, that has not been included, but I think it's definitely something that's being, it's being looked at. There's also talk, and conversation around, like a differential for teachers who.
So that's what I was gonna ask from a U of T standpoint. If you can go work, you're a first year teacher, you can work at 128, class size matters, or the other side of the park at 49, where you have 33 kids in the class, sometimes you have overflow, you have more.
So,
Like,
the U of T class size contractual class size is 25 students in a K and 32 students in grades 1 through 5. And middle school, if you're Title I, is 30 kids plus, and if you're non-Title I, is 33. That's the UT contractual
So it is
class
still.
size. It's still the same, and had not been changed. So, and that's why, in the beginning, it said we're still negotiating with the unions, both the supervisor union and the teacher union. That law came from the state, but with that law, you have to bring additional money. So if there's no additional money, then the school adheres to the UT contractual class size. And that's why not every single classroom is at 20. It's only the classes that receive additional funding. Because the UT class size is still stands. The contract is still there.
Are they working to change that contract or no?
I cannot speak on the UT.
Okay,
I'm not a lawyer.
no, I was just, okay, that, I didn't
You know,
realize.
to the question that Leah asked earlier, one of the challenges that we're facing is schools, many of our schools have had the privilege of some excess space. Not enough to like recreate the entire program, but enough to create a second science lab, to create a visual arts room, a music room, and a hydroponics lab. And so those are only like 4, 5, 6 additional spaces. And when those are already established in the school, and that school is now like being pushed to comply.
Right.
So we go in there with what we call a footprint, where we know how many students there are, and we do the math. And when we check that against the available space, we know that there's enough space to accommodate a move toward compliance. And we're met with energy from schools like, wait, but we're utilizing this space.
But that was something James Leahy, I remember specifically, he said, when possible, they try to keep, not the spirit of the school,
Yeah.
but what you're saying, like,
Absolutely. Like we want to maintain the
Right.
programs in place.
we're not gonna take away the art room, and now the art teacher's pushing a cart.
Yeah, because
Correct.
one of the schools I'm a liaison, they are in compliance, but their music teacher's on a cart, OPT is on a cart, like, I don't know, is it worth it?
That's-
Is it worth it?
No.
That's the question, right? And so, and folks are navigating it well. But yeah, it's attention that we're negotiating with schools. And I think a lot of our schools have been really creative. Some of our schools who received awards last year did not receive awards this year because they were also looked at differently, right? They looked at schools to see like where's the opportunity and who are the furthest behind with the opportunity.
So what do you do then, the access, like when that happens, if you got money, then you didn't get money?
So they'll receive money for the ones that received money last year for those teacher hires, they'll receive money for that this year. And then we have to figure out what that is. I mean, it's a behemoth. It's just about as bold an initiative that has been undertaken in the system. So long as that kind of part of it. Financially, it's bold.
Yeah, I should.
But that's why they have the public comment pages, the slides, whatever you wanna, questions and or whatever comments you wanna submit, please do that.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
So class size means there, class size of schools. All right.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah,
Any more questions?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
You're welcome.
Good. It wasn't tech, like,